I watched one video a day for 100 days of Hasan Piker. But the script was long, and I was kind of worried about the length of the video, and while trying to think about ways to cut it down, this happened.
I did text him a couple weeks ago after I saw the clip of him saying that he had no problem with Hezbollah.
And well, one man's anti-Semitism is another man's blessing, so now I'm kind of going to be focusing on geopolitical topics. Now, I didn't really know what was going to happen when I started watching him. Like, would I become Allah, Allah, Akbar? Or would it be a bit more like... But all that really ended up happening is I started to get into these videos that were harassing Muslim and Jewish commentators, where they would ask these religious commentators just ridiculous questions. I couldn't get enough of it. The comment section was a little bit nasty, but it's a lot of free speech on Instagram. But anyway, all this aside, I'm only going to be watching his YouTube videos. I kind of wanted this unbiased opinion where I could take a claim, research it. So let's kind of kick things off with the Trump rally incident. Because I was kind of hoping for like this wordsmith of the most foul opinion. But it kind of shocked me because, you know, I have this perception of Hasan from all these other channels. But his takes were good.
Yo! What the Times like this, there's always a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos. I'm not even talking about like people who are deliberately spreading disinformation, but also just people misunderstanding. We don't know yet, okay? Until there is official confirmation from the police, from the Secret Service, you know, from actual people that have conducted their investigations. Don't run with any narrative.
You know, his chat was saying, I hope the people are okay. And one funny thing someone said, it was like, if only people in the crowd had guns. I just thought that was hilarious. It just made me think internally, like, oh no, it's the Antifa tank brigade. I know, you just had funny moments.
Clearly,
he's still throwing up
there are a
fists
lot
while
of
they're
events
putting him
that
in
have
the
moved very
car,
quickly
bro.
at this
Stop throwing
time.
up
The
the
president,
fist.
only
Stop
moments
it.
before this took place,
Stop throwing,
was
stop
in the
fisting.
church at Rehoboth,
Stop.
and then he exited the
Every
church.
fist is
Reporters
another
asked him if he
10,000 in a
had- if
fucking
he
red
was aware
state,
that
a
or had
key
been
state turning into
informed
a
about it
red
at that
state.
time.
Like, for a first video, it was good. I could see why someone would get into actually watching Hasan after this. I know it's not geopolitical, but that's kind of what I wanted to show. Like, you know, you could watch this and be like, I kind of like him. I'm going to keep watching him. And similar to the next video, which was like Israel just had its January the 6th moment. This was kind of interesting because I never knew about stay teeman. I will never learn to pronounce a foreign word. I'm sorry.
As you guys know, Sde Tayman is a concentration camp. That's where Palestinians in Gaza are through a protocol known as Dragnet, where every and any Palestinian that they have declared to be a terrorist is picked up, first of all, humiliated, stripped down to their underwear, and then postured around as though they're like all terrorists or whatever, without any evidence whatsoever. And then they put them in this concentration camp.
And it really reminded me of the Stanford prison experiment, where a role and an environment and how that could really just shape a person's behavior, where like immediately it becomes us versus them and you had this abuse of power. But then if you get that experiment, say, and you mix it in with historic and current tensions, like you can imagine how dark that gets, like pretty quickly. So you'd expect this good amount of oversight to counteract that sort of reality from playing out. But it got none of that. It took a whistleblower to expose what was happening. Then once it was uncovered, the Israel government and those involved, zero accountability, which was kind of made all the more concerning given that civilians were being held there for months. Now, he even mentioned the ICC. So think about this useless international court.
The irony, of course, that these inbred don't understand is that the only reason why Israel is moving to actually detain some of the, not all, but some of the, is so they can actually stop the international organs of justice adequately prosecuting Israel for their war crimes.
So when you commit a war crime, they're meant to come in and investigate you. Except you then pull out the Uno reverse, citing the complementary policy to investigate yourself. And lo and behold, would you look at that, you're completely innocent. In short, they're completely useless in first world countries because you have political pressure, they'll cut funding. They just don't have the enforcement to actually go into a country and pull it off. So yeah, I expected it to be worse, like much worse. It had me questioning how I actually perceived Hasan. Well, at least for now, because there were things that you'd start to pick up on and notice. Like I'd have loads of notes down, and you could just see me slowly figuring it out. I don't know, it'll really start to make sense in these next few videos.
Israel, even though they didn't officially technically take credit for it, Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh. Ismail Haniyeh, for those of you who don't know, is the Politburo chief of Hamas. He is not the military commander. He is not a part of the Hamas military wing at all. He is the politics chief, the political bureau chief, okay? As in the main guy who was a part of the negotiations process. The way that you need to understand it is like he is basically like a diplomat, and his job and his responsibility in this circumstance is the facilitation of the ceasefire.
Now, this isn't the best of looks, right? Taking out the head negotiator to a ceasefire. But let's not talk about that yet. Let's let Hasan build up a narrative here.
Palestinian.
של בן אדם, זה לגיטימי?
כן, אם הוא נוח'בה, הכל לגיטימי לעשות לו.
אוקיי,
הכל. הכל.
In the Sdei Teiman facility.
There we go, more to the narrative. We have wild opinions from the far-right groups in the Israeli government. Keep it coming.
If there is an escalation and the United States is brought in to a regional conflict in a much more meaningful capacity in terms of like American soldiers, that's precisely what Benjamin Netanyahu wants.
Oh, and they want an all-out war between Iran and America next.
Protests like this 2 days ago. That's what Israel's worried about. How much can their soldiers do on Palestinians that they've detained? That's their top priority right now. The fact that we are going in 10 toes down on this like genocidal apartheid regime.
So here's the thing, right? A lot of what Hasan talks about is kind of like mostly true, like, you know? But realize as a new viewer who's watching this is what I now believe. 1, Israel has a concentration camp. 2, it assassinated an innocent lead negotiator for a ceasefire because it doesn't want one. 3, it's committing a genocide. 4, they want an all-out war with Iran. And 5, they support prisoners being abused. And you kind of think, wait a minute, how did I get here? And I kind of think it's down to 2 reasons, right? So 1, everything that is bad is kind of taken to its negative extreme. Do you remember the detention camp, which he called a concentration camp?
As you guys know, Sdei Teiman is a concentration camp.
So realize the term like concentration camp is a little heavy, you know? A detention camp is this sort of like temporary holding area for, it's sort of like administration reasons, and it can also serve as a prison. Where a concentration camp is more like indefinite, unbiased, you're here to stay and the conditions are crap. Yeah, but there is a difference. You know, it's a big one. Like, I wouldn't even have complained if he said it's a detention camp that recently got overcrowded due to the war that has broken out, and it started to grow elements to which you would find in a concentration camp, such as mass overcrowding, insufficient food, abuse, poor medical treatment. But to make a direct comparison is just a little bit, you know, like, wild, right? But this isn't the first time an extremely heavy word is overused and kind of stretched out of context. Like, take genocide. What's going on in Israel and Gaza doesn't reach the requirements. For a start, there is no intent that is provable, such as the Israel government saying that they're going after, say, the Hamas leadership. And you also cannot say that civilian casualties in war should be, like, declared as genocide, or the word kind of means nothing at this point, right? And we can all agree, like, it's disgusting. You have schools, hospitals, important just infrastructure for a country to have is being destroyed. Let alone those that need them are now completely unable to access them. They probably won't be able to access them in the future for a long period of time. And, you know, just have these kids with their futures kind of wiped away. All their potential that they could have had just gone over a choice they had no control over, only to be left like emotionally scarred and in fear. Like, you don't need to like make that worse, you know, like it's already pretty horrific. But it also seems like almost intentionally left out, because it is a common talking point that Israel, compared to many other militaries, is going above and beyond when it comes to pre-warning. They have these procedures where they do phone calls, leaflets, these like, I don't know, roof knocking bombs or something. But when people talk about the genocide and then they mention the casualty figure, I don't know why they don't ever mention Hamas's like influence towards it, who use civilian housing and infrastructure for the storage of weapons, making weapons, and just a place to shoot from, essentially. Because there's like years worth of accusations agreed upon by governments, international organizations, and journalists that this is actually going on. Even accusations that they've been wearing civilian clothing while being combatants. As it has been stated many times, it is a terrorist organization that is kind of happy to put its own people at risk such that it can support its ideology. But let's make this clear. If it were true, it would likely break the American alliance with Israel. It would call for potentially a military intervention. It would have them sanctioned, none of which is really happening because no official leader in the world would actually go ahead and call it that. And neither is any international body. Like, I think there was a court between South America and Israel. However, the court basically said, right now we're going to have to wait a couple years until we can go over basically the paperwork and military operations to actually make a determining factor. And all they really did was recommend this is what you can do to make sure that it doesn't happen. Yeah, so one, anything that is bad, pushed to the extreme, like completely. Which kind of leads me on to my second point, which is it just feels as though he's really knowledgeable on the area, yet I don't want to say he intentionally like leaves things out, but like for how knowledgeable he is, you'd think he'd be aware to it. Or maybe, and you could argue that he's just not bringing it up, but it would be strange to not bring it up in the circumstances to which he's talking. I know. I just don't know if it's intentional or not, okay? But he does leave out information that is very important. And one of the biggest issues is if you're, say, unconscious to this information, it can easily have you believe in some sort of inaccurate portrayal of a situation, causing your, say, solutions or viewpoints on that situation just to be a bit wild. For example, right, not once has he mentioned that Hamas is an Iran proxy, let alone mentioned Iran. And you can't really ignore that in this conflict. And although we have this wild, like, you know, I completely think it's an unacceptable opinion that was made in the Israeli government, at the same time, I imagine that Hamas has said very questionable things about Israeli people. And when you consistently turn a blind eye to, like, these other, say, actors in the game, it's just, you know, you're overly painting this one factor, this one villain, while leaving out these other bad actors. Because they're all bad actors, right? But you're just trying to, like, emphasize one as the leader. So let's take this negotiator. He leaves out important things you should probably know. Like, he has stolen money from Palestinian people that he claims to vouch for. He would also hardline, like, ludicrous policies in a ceasefire talk. And although, yes, he was in the political camp of Hamas, that it doesn't make, you know, the political wing and militant wing, like, completely separate, right? Like, as I'm trying to say here, they're probably somewhat interlinked. I think people would agree there. So yes, it is highly likely that he was involved in the October attacks, but we don't have that intel. Maybe Israel does, but we won't know until those documents are released. He also praised the attack on October the 7th. So, you know, it's like, yeah, he was a moderate in some ways, but, you know, compared to some. But, you know, don't paint him as this sort of reasonable guy. He would also rather go to Iran to continue, say, having them fund this, like, military endeavor, you know, to keep being a pawn, a proxy, rather do what's best for his people and, you know, compromise to make peace. So yeah, he's just nowhere near as effective as people make him out to be, in my opinion, or as moderate. And it doesn't help that Israel doesn't really want a ceasefire. I think that's pretty clear with, you know, little Benjamin over here, who just wants a mass gone, more than a return of the hostages, which is why he kicked out his military commander, and because he didn't have an end goal for what happened when they actually eliminated Hamas. But do realize, right, a ceasefire to Israel just sounds like a sort of, we're going to pause the game, Iran is going to go to their proxy, rearm them, retrain them, rebuild them, and then they're probably going to attack again. And even though this is a little bit of like a simplification of the whole thing, like, it just goes to show you how simplified Hasan makes it. And when it came to, say, the protesters and this guy, this is the far right. It doesn't, like, represent the overall view of Israeli people, similar to when you covered the UK riots. You said this is just the lunatic far right. Yeah, these people are horrible. And the reason they're horrible, I'm not trying to justify and say it's right. It's completely wrong. And they should be consciously aware to the fact that they believe that they are facing these external monsters, which are just, you know, people. And they're trying to become this sort of bigger monster to combat them. And it's just disgusting to look at. And they should just look in the mirror, right? It's like, look at the story you're trapped into. You know, crazy how often he highlights it and he goes out his way to find it. And the moment you kind of have one person with a sort of left-wing Israeli like view, that person is then, say, like, demonized. So in summary, I've just noticed bias reporting, selective reporting, and maybe that's in like let's say a 5 or 15 degree angle, but over time that really adds up. But let's go over how he covers Hamas and Lebanon, which is kind of rare for him to ever do, at least on his YouTube. So let's start with Israel on fire.
Initial assessment at our disposal, they were brutally murdered by Hamas terrorists a short while before we reached them. They were abducted alive on the morning of October 7th by the Hamas terror organization.
Hamas is blaming Israel for the deaths. A Hamas spokesperson.
So Israeli hostages were found dead. Now Israel will blame Hamas, and that's likely due to Hamas claiming they were unalive hostages if Israel attempts to save them, and Israel not knowing they were there could have prompted that. Also, you have substantial claims by the HRW, for example, that these hostages are then used as human shields. Now, how they actually died is unverified from what I've actually read. However, if you were a betting man, right, if you were, let's say if you were wrong, you had to gargle boatloads of cum, I'd bet on Hamas, right? So to see lies being put in chat is really insidious, as it just takes away all accountability. Now, hopefully I find this video, I kind of forgot to stamp it, but in short, a news program claimed that Hamas was not elected, and his chat was going, lies, this is not true. Now, obviously, in a democracy, a party is only considered democratically elected for the 4 years it is in power after being elected. If it deletes the elections, then after the 4 years are up, you can't say they're still in there democratically. And, you know, we're talking over 10 years in power. They often oppose alternative political movements and, you know, indoctrinate, etc. But here's how I feel. And it's hard, right? As he is such a bitch about giving his opinion. Here's what I think his opinion is. Based on what I've watched, what I know, and there's going to be, you know, it's a big assumption here. I'm trying to guess a puzzle without all the pieces. I feel as if he's very focused on the humanitarian concerns, and, you know, justifiably so, right? And he does state the historic treatment of this region is why radicalized movements find support amongst Palestinians. And to him, this is a couple of reasons why he's likely to call Hamas a resistance group, which it kind of is, but being a resistance group doesn't make you good or bad. It's the goals and methods onto which you use, and that kind of defines them. You know, you can agree with their, say, goals, but not their methods. But I think he's likely to then argue they've tried diplomacy. It never worked. So do you expect them just to do nothing, roll over and accept their fate of being conquered by these imperial powers? Now, all of this kind of to the side, like initially, right, part of this humanitarian concern is due to the likelihood of terrorism. Say, take the blockade, right? Hasan will undermine this because, you know, obviously Israel knows that stopping it will be a big threat to its security, as weapons and arms could actually make their way through. And obviously a country is going to then put its civilians first. And the goals of this resistance movement is to remove Israel. Like, there is one major factor, right, in that signing a sort of two-state solution, or when peace deals have been, say, brushed aside, one major factor was, for a Palestinian, it'd be seen as officially legitimizing the occupying settlement. You know, there are other factors. You have, say, settlements, the right to return, territorial compromises. So does Hasan support terrorism, which is a big question? And to be fair, like, I don't really know. If he's going to continuously point to them, If he's calling them resistant groups more than he's calling them terrorists, I would raise an eyebrow there, you know?
So while fact checking and just going through all the points of my video to make sure I'm like correct on hopefully everything, I found this.
Including obviously militant, like leaders involved in militancy within the resistance groups against Israel and America in the region.
But it wouldn't shock me if his audience did, because if you're not careful with this topic, with how he has laid it out by downplaying and emphasizing, leaving out information, you can easily get this sort of romanticizing of terrorism. Then all you need to do is then conclude this labeling of terrorist is only to undermine the Palestinian message, and they're only doing violence because there's just no other way. And it's because it's also Israel's fault for all the failures of peace. Oh, and then you just have to then believe that Israel is specifically targeting civilians, aka the genocide, and then ta-da, you're a terrorist. You can kind of see where the thought pattern goes here, and then all the bits you kind of have to be blind to and then leave out, and then you can kind of make that point. But it's insane to me how he would go down that sort of thought path, and then when he shows the Israelis right or far right, which have some opinions, a little bit dark and twisted ones, and some often racial at times, there is no acknowledgement that when all your neighbors want you eliminated and they're carrying and promoting these anti-Semitic messages, and then you have global voices such as Hasan who overemphasize your bad behavior, they never give you reasoning, they downplay the other actors, people act as if they're against the far right as they create an environment that fosters it. I would even argue elements of Israel's far-right groups are just as bad as the terrorists they claim to fight. It's that quote, right? If you believe you fight evil, it's easy to become evil in the pursuit of that. But obviously, although I would criticize the far-right and the right in Israel, he would never then do that to Hamas. So let's move on to Lebanon. I want to focus on the land where Mia Khalifa came from. And I want to focus on how he talks about their political system mostly.
Can you explain the relationship between Hezbollah and the Lebanese government? Are they the government? They're a part of the Lebanese government, yes. I believe they have 18 seats in the parliament. The Lebanese government is a multi-party the Lebanese government has a multi-party parliament. Hezbollah is not our government. Okay, it's not the government, but it absolutely has, as you also correctly pointed to and corrected me on, not 18, but 15 seats. I think 3 additional seats that are no, it's not like they're Green Party.
And my issue is he kind of makes it out to be more democratic than it actually is. You have to remember, Hezbollah probably wields more influence than the Lebanon government. I mean, this is a bit of an opinion here, but an opinion held by many. But I believe this is obviously due to them having a stronger military than the government that doesn't answer to the government and goes against the actual government's foreign policy. Hence, it's referred to as a state within a state. Because Hezbollah does engage in running schools and hospitals and even, I think, welfare. It's a democracy, but it's significantly influenced by Hezbollah. Many debate its democratic integrity. And it should also be stated, obviously, it's an Iran proxy. And even though some members of the government would want a better relationship with the West or the Saudi, Hezbollah just says no every time. But as far as people's feelings towards this group, it's very similar with Hamas once again. It's a mixture of a failure of diplomatic processes, historic grievances, imperialistic elements, a sprinkle of indoctrination. Hence, it does have a lot of public support. And now, is it a terrorist organization? Well, I mean, what would you call an organization that bombs a Jewish community center? Obviously, just do a Google search. You're going to find out how they use terror and target civilians. So yeah, it's pretty clear that he underplays Hezbollah and Hamas. It's very clear they don't get the same level of treatment. It's a horrific double standard. And sure, Israel holds a sort of, greater military might, but morally speaking, all should be held to the same standard. But let's get into how he feels about Western geopolitics. As you have these historical events which are quite bad, these recent ones that weren't very good either. Hence, you have this sort of anti-Western narrative. And in more recent history, the West has tried to improve it, often, obviously somewhat in their own interest, right? That's kind of what all countries do all the time. No country is going to allocate army members to the peacekeepers unless it helps them strategically, right? But this can be like humanitarian aid, allowing people to come over to be educated, refugees. Because obviously, right, stability, peace and prosperity in the Middle East it's in everyone's interest, like kind of obviously, right? But let's just kind of get a really good analysis here of what Hasan thinks about Western geopolitics.
Reaction between Russia and Israel? It's a very easy answer. Russia is our enemy. Israel is our ally. That's it. Our allies can do no wrong. Our enemies can do no right.
Okay, so moving on, let's speed run this a little bit, and you're gonna see why. Trust me. Let's talk human shields.
Okay? There is no such thing as human shields, okay? And that's something that I understand. And that's something that you need to understand as well. I actually believe that these scumbags only deploy that.
Okay, let's talk about the procedures Israel's military uses, right?
Overall, the way that this played out is that they didn't even know that they actually ended up targeting and killing Yahya Sinwar. They thought that they were just targeting and killing random Palestinians. Basically, they see 3 people that they think are suspicious. Those 3 people scatter. There's like a firefight. One of them runs into this building. The building is shelled.
I will say here, they have procedures, and like, if he said they have procedures, but in every war you have so many cases where those procedures were loose and often not followed, that would be, like, fine. But he's kind of painting out that they go, oh, shady Arabs. You know what I mean? Like, they go to a school, like, oh, future combatants. You know, every bullet is ignorant. Anyway, what about the Houthis?
Okay, you can preface it with that. Does he know what One Piece is?
أكيد يعني منذ الطفولة وأنا أشاهد ون بيس لوفي.
Is it Luffy?
Yeah, he said he's been watching it since he was a kid.
That's fire. That's so fire. Oh my god, dude. We think the Houthis, Ansar Allah, is doing what Luffy would do.
Because I don't remember this being in Luffy's Jolly Roger. I don't remember Luffy having slaves. I don't remember Luffy not allowing certain people to receive humanitarian aid and attacking civilian vessels. Like, it's a wild comparison. What do you mean? This is exactly what Luffy would do. Wait, what's this?
Apparently Joe Rogan is more reliable than you. What is this? The new media bias thing came out. Is this for real? Wait, what? There's no way, dude. There is no way. Contains misleading info. And on the right, I'm under Joe Rogan. Like Joe Rogan, Red Scare Podcast, Ben Shapiro, The Ingram Angle, Project Veritas. Project Veritas. I am the equivalent of InfoWars. Wow, how about it? Oh, look alive, Jack. I love Israel. I'm a Zionist. Israel can kill as many babies as it wants, Jack. Look alive.
You're not Alex Jones.
Hi, this is Barack Obama without my teleprompter. I was raised by the Ford Foundation and Carnegie Endowment. Welcome to McDonald's. May I help you? I'm Bernie Sanders.
Like, I will be honest, at first, I did think he would be higher, but as time went on, that kind of does seem accurate. You know, the idea, the person who argues about what Bigfoot and the moon landings is more factual, I kind of agree. That's so embarrassing. But let's talk about his peace process.
Issue. You don't believe in a 2-state solution. I'm assuming.
I used to be. I used to believe in a 2-state solution. I was an advocate for a 2-state solution.
So he believes in this sort of 1-state solution. I just don't think it really respects either party's, say, sovereignty. For example, will it then be called Israel or Gaza? Palestine, how will the government be laid out? I mean, you could only really imagine the internal conflict and it becoming deeply unstable. Or it could even turn into a situation that's quite similar to Yemen, where there was an economic bias between the North and the South, with the North prioritizing the North economically while kind of leaving the South behind, and the South feeling as if they'd been eaten up. I don't know, I just think the 2-state solution is the most stable option, where the 1-state solution sounds very idealistic and kind of unfeasible. And I think if you're going to state your solution, you should give reasons why. Maybe he has done, it's just not on a video. I don't know why these streamers don't have a channel where they just go over the whole topic in an hour and give all their thoughts and then just update it over time. But for someone who wants peace, it's weird when he paints Israel as the problem and the only one who can solve it, when in reality peace can only be achieved if both sides compromise. You know, if Israel loosens its security and offers up more land, while Palestinians give up the idea that they're going to get all the land back and stop other countries from egging them on, and thinking that Jerusalem is going to be their capital. And they need to realize that they can achieve certain things, but they can't achieve that in the initial peace talks. They're going to have to achieve that later on when tensions are like lessened. And a similar thing can be said with Lebanon. And Iran also needs to kind of take some accountability that what it's doing is wrong and stop trying to like push them to militarily attack by giving them arms and training them. You know, it's a collective process, believe it or not. I'll say this, I mean, I'm going to be saying it on an individual level, but it applies on a sort of geopolitical level, which is more of a, in my opinion, like a collective of emotion and thought. It's a bit more complicated than that, but you get the point. Like, people will hate you and come after you in life, waiting for the moment they can then justify it after, like, just tormenting you. But in my opinion, just don't give it to them. You know, let them open all the doors to hell. Like, there's enough suffering. Like, do we need more? And I'm not saying, like, revenge should be, say, rejected from your psyche. I don't think it should. I think you should let it consume you. But realize at the same time, in getting it, you hurt others, which will then cause them to hurt others, kind of echoing out until it hurts someone you love. So in the end, the only revenge possible is creating a better world where less experience that sort of historic or situation. And at least that way, you don't have to look back and see destruction as you become someone who is just like completely twisted by trauma, only to never overcome it. And like, damn, if you could see yourself in the mirror, you'd be haunted. Because, you know, there is a strength to those people that can, say, walk through hell and not get burned. And it's just kind of sickening that all this, say, retarded philosophy and morals of one side justifying itself against the other, I thought it was used to find the best possible path forward, one consumed in love and made with the best interest of everyone. Like, not just what's best for you and then screw the other, you know? Like is that what you kind of read in your book while you say disregard your own heart? And this kind of applies to both parties here. You know, the idea that Hasan wants peace, right? If I was fixing a car and I was unaware to the majority of measurements, I would never be able to fix the car. You know, if there's a drama in your life and you're unaware to the aspects which cause it, be it in yourself or in your environment, it's never going to get solved. Let alone, I still have no idea how we can desire peace when his messaging alone will only produce an environment which further polarizes both sides by pushing people to the extremes. The idea he wants peace, in my opinion, is just a joke. But obviously, right, because when you're dealing with a communist or a Nazi, right, you're dealing with an extreme. And who's gonna, like, you need to be so bloody emotionally and intellectually compromised to the point where you're gonna actually, you know, where your emotions latch on to that ideology. Like, you're never gonna meet one that's, like, emotionally stable and hasn't been riddled with mental illness, yet still feels the need to preach. It's like, how about you fix yourself? Because you're wrong all the time. A bad activist is going to do so much more harm than it ever will good.
And I really just want to add to this, because when he's going over the Ethan, say, criticism, he dials it back.
Israel only exists in reality as an apartheid state. So no, Israel cannot exist as an apartheid state. This does not mean that every single Jewish person that lives there has to be forcibly expelled, because that would be cruel. That would be violent. That would be, ironically, what Israel did to the Palestinians in its inception of its nation state in an act called the Nakba in 1948. Israel cannot exist as an ethno-nationalist state that occupies territory that dominates millions, tens of millions of Palestinians every day. Yeah, the expulsion of Israelis is why I support a one-state solution, or the expulsion of, like, directly settlers in the West Bank is why I support a one-state solution. It's not going to happen. And it would be cruel and unusual punishment. Why is it cruel, Hasan? They never cared when they did it to us Palestinians? Okay, examine that thought a little bit and you will understand. You must never allow yourself to become like your oppressors. That's the whole point.
It does make me think if people have come to this assumption because he pushes the idea that Israel is this horrific creature where these other people are just resistant fighters, you know, they're standing up towards Israel. So if it was all one state, all Israel has to do and the Israelis have to do is like settle down and calm down. That's all they have to do. But there'd still be massive internal division regardless. And it shocks me that he will say this despite having, you know, glazed and somewhat romanticized these groups that are terrorists with the goal of destroying Israel.
Let's kind of finish this off with Hasan going through a list of accusations.
Just a quick reference point to what Hasan actually believes versus the lies. 1. Hasan enables anti-Semitism to be commonplace on Twitch. No.
Come on. Anti-Semitism has no place in the leftist movement.
So straight off, I really don't think Hasan is anti-Semitic. I really think this probably comes from more of a anti-Western imperialism and just anti-Western in general viewpoint. But I will say, right, when it comes to, say, Jew and Zionist, the lines get very hazy. A Zionist is, it's like the core principle that Israel should exist. But you have Jews who believe Israel, should exist, but they're not Zionist, even though these people will then paint them as actually, no, you are a Zionist. And also you have different types of Zionism. So yeah, it just creates a very hazy grey area, which is why when people go, I hate Zionists, people often hear, I hate Jews.
Hasan, your opinions have changed. No, they haven't. Hasan denies what happened on October 7. Hasan laughed at Kamala bringing up October 7. No, he doesn't.
With the second one, I don't know why he didn't just play the clip that got him the accusation and then explain it. I don't know why he has to go to a quote from some random stream when he... You know what I mean?
There are some other points. No, Hasan supports Russia. No, he doesn't. He also raised $200K for Ukraine.
So 4 is obviously supporting Russia. Now, the weird part about this one is that I would expect Hasan to do a charity stream for humanitarian aid for Ukraine. At the same time, it doesn't really prove anything. I'd expect that from Hasan regardless of his position. Like, I don't know why you don't just play a clip of him criticizing Putin's reasoning.
Apartheid state. It's a constant Israeli occupation in the West Bank and constant control over Gaza as well, which has been a demonstrable failure for Israeli security, obviously. You and I agree on that. But my solution basically, when I say I want a one state, is first and foremost a moral one, because I do want the end to the apartheid.
Number 6, the use of apartheid. I can't say it right. Apartheid? Am I saying it right? I did some research onto this. Obviously, it's one of those situations where there are elements, but it's nowhere near a direct comparison. But by doing this, you then kind of make Israel look worse. It doesn't take into account the security concerns and then just hides it behind that it's actually done due to race, in my opinion.
For a year, Hasan was constantly elevating people that hate me. Hasan has always defended I think you're a good person. Just understand that people don't know the empathy that you have and simply see similar talking points that they've heard from others that don't demonstrate that same empathy.
Also, finally, his take on H3H3, like, it's okay, but like, is that really the best response you could come up with? Wild.
He's pretending that he has nothing to do with this. Ridiculous. He pulled the sub up on stream. I don't know why he's embarrassed about the association with Destiny. Like, I actually don't get it. It's not like we've seen it. I know where these talking points are coming from. Like,
Pretty severe the way that he draws everything back to Destiny. I don't know him. I've never talked about him on the channel. Because Destiny's been getting like mega canceled by every conservative for saying he doesn't give a fuck about the guy who died, which is whatever. Here's the one where he actually had a debate with Destiny. And main guys, there's Vosh, Destiny, and Hasan, and they all hate each other. They're all social, or no, Destiny's not socialist, but they're all like libs.
It's not that. My point is he's getting his compilation of clips, I don't think from his own production staff, to do like this clipped out of context, like Hasan is extremist, loves Russia, loves China.
Like, he mentions Destiny talking points, and I don't really like that. I feel as though it undermines a political opinion someone might have come to naturally through the information that they've researched. Like, if you read BBC and some of these, articles that I'm reading, then you're going to come to a lot of the same conclusions I'm going to come to. But in the land of, like, online politics, I imagine people are kind of seen as parrots to a political commentator. It's like a church, right, where the priest, he, like, gives the people his view, and they're like, that is the psalm of the day. I'm going to go tell it to everyone I know. And they go out, and then they parrot that point out. So I kind of don't blame him here for, like, this, but it's somewhat understandable, but you have to kind of be careful because you're going to end up overusing it in a way to dismiss someone's argument and then dismiss them, when in reality, if you know the talking point, you should already know the counter talking point to it. So why not just hash that out the same way they parrot the talking point?
Can I also add, I just watched some footage of Destiny going over Hasan. I don't really see out of context clips. I see him watching Hasan in full.
But it's kind of weird that there was just no debate. There wasn't even one debate. I just kind of expect that from a political commentator, honestly, because they can be so good for learning. Like, I learned a lot from watching Hasan and researching his points. Even in my real life, when I've talked to people about situations, we talk about the information we know and how we feel about it, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, even this video alone has caused me to, like, learn so much because I've never really looked at Israel from this critical of a lens. But yeah, overall, I'm probably not going to cover the Ethan drama. This video is taking so long. So please do like and subscribe, because if you enjoy this and it gets support, I'm going to cover it, but just in a different video where I can give it more, like, time and creative effort. And that way it will appear on your feed. Or maybe I'll go after Destiny. You know what I mean? It's like kind of go after the man who Hasan is obviously scared of, you know. That seems like kind of fun as well. So I'll see what I'm more interested in, really.